We.
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Obelisk. Tonight's guest is Holly Seeliger. Holly's run the YouTube channel Zoon Politikon since 2016, where she does interviews and commentary on history, news, and culture. Originally from Maine, she got her BA in political science from the University of Southern Maine. After dabbling in local politics, serving as an independent candidate, she is now working on a book about the Salem Witch Trials and its connection to mass hysteria and the modern inoculation movement. Holly, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jerry. Hey, Nish.
Hey, I was really excited today when I heard you were working on a book with the witch trials because the astrology of the day has some similarities. So I found that quite provocative.
Really? I hope we get to talk about that.
Let's talk about it. Yeah, no, I was interested in that too because I see a lot of similarities in what's going on. I'm right there.
I had a couple points that, like key points here, that I definitely wanted us to meander through today. And one was the single family zoning that's already starting to roll out. Oh, there we go. I live in a very small town.
What's that single family zoning all about? I've never heard of that.
It's part of the 2030, 2040 UN stuff.
UN.
But it, that was in conspiracy land forever. But it's rolling out, and it's rolling out in Minneapolis.
Really?
And so I saw Holly was talking about that recently. And also, my other note, like I said, was the Salem Witch Trials. So I'd love us to weave all that into our conversation, but give us an idea of who you are.
Yeah, thanks. That's a cool intro. Yeah, lots of things we could talk about right now in this kind of strange time that we're living in. So it's interesting when you start to jump down some of these rabbit holes. You think you're just talking about one particular topic, and then things all seem to kind of weave in together. And yeah, I've been working on a book. Never realized how long it takes to write a book, actually. But I started writing a book about the Salem Witch Trials and just mass hysteria type events, like trying to figure out originally like why it happened, who were the people, that sort of stuff. And I know there's probably 100 books on the topic already, but I grew up in New England. I grew up in Maine, so there's always these stories about like the people there and who were they and why did they turn on each other, and just seeing a lot of strange coincidences between the people back then and then like people nowadays, just both living in a small community, and then like the bigger picture of like who Americans are, and what our belief systems are. And there's just some things that seem to always overlap with people.
Yeah, there are. It's interesting. One of my best friends who is out here in the world, named Montana Jordan, she is a direct descendant of two of the women that were hung, and has some interesting, and through, has the paper trail and all that, and has some interesting documentation on them that I don't know, you may find interesting. I don't know if you know who she is, but she's out there. So that's also juicy to look into, how it trickled down to the modern day descendants of those people on all sides, of that little drama that unfolded.
Yeah, I'm start to look at like who the Puritan people were, and like everywhere between like Massachusetts and up New England. And I think between like the people who um, got off of the boat, like the first couple of boats of pilgrims and Puritans, it's a large percent of the American population is somehow descended from these people, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. Um, so it's like 20 million people or something, or like direct descendants. And then I can't believe it, but yeah, like you said, a lot of people can actually trace their history back to Salem. And I think there is like a renewed interest in the story. And I think I hope that that person that you know, even she could even write a book about it probably, because there's still, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to Salem, but it's basically like a haunted Disneyland for like adults. It's huge. I mean, the whole the whole community, everything is just totally wrapped around this story. It's really kind of a crazy place to go to and see for yourself. So she should definitely check it out.
Yeah, I love Salem. It is very tourist. Although
Wait. Montana hasn't been there?
I don't know if Montana had. I'm sure she has.
Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about Montana Jordan.
Yeah, okay.
She's pretty well known in the world. She's a witch. She's, I can't remember. She's direct descendant of two of them that were hung in the trials. But yeah, it's weird how genealogy works like that. It's the descendants of Charlemagne. Everyone thinks that's special, and then the numbers that it comes out to are just gigantic. It's like, I'm a descendant of Charlemagne, and it's like, well, join the millions of others.
What's with the wolf?
He hears something. I'm not sure. I have two wolves, so you start hearing howling.
I'll be apropos right now.
Yeah, for real.
I have to mute for it.
It's okay. We're used to the dog barking. My cat will start bitching pretty soon. Pat me. Anyway.
Hopefully you won't hear a baby, but there could be a baby in the background at some point.
It's par for the course, and we're all about it.
But this is a timely talk because we're talking about our bloodlines, and we're talking about ancestry, and it does seem like, whereas I have no idea what he's going off on. He usually doesn't go off like this.
I've never heard the dog bark that much.
I know, it's unbelievable. But it's, so this is the 1600s, and she is just like the rest of us with relatives in the 1600s, we may be descendant from them, but we have no real connection to them, in the real sense of the word, as far as what they did then. I mean, I feel like the stuff my mother did, I should not be responsible for. Those are her actions. And so the chaos that was happening in that Salem area, I feel like all the descendants should be exonerated from too. This was another drama in another time and space. And certainly there are vibrational waves that move out from there, but to hold the relatives of the people that hung those people under witchcraft should not be something we pursue now. And that's it's a timely thing, and it's a timely meme.
Could it be too that there's unresolved karma going on?
Yeah, I mean, if we start talking spiritually, we're talking another idea. But to say, from Montana to come forward and say, I want these families to, I want their heads, the descendants of these families, I want their heads on a platter. It would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? I mean, this is so far removed from the past. And so, yes, spiritually, I understand needing a healing and a cleansing and separation, but it would just be, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of what I've been thinking about with everything that goes on in the world today, not just today, but in my lifetime. And so at what point do we pay for our parents' sins? You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm asking. That's the question I'm posing here.
Right. I think if you're talking about like generational oppression or generational retribution.
Yes. And at what point, is it your child should not have to pay, and that's a direct response, would be your child, right, Holly? But say, let's just remove it a step, maybe your grandchild or your great grandchild. I think should have their own autonomy away, and you should have your own autonomy. And and these kinds of things that are like generational debts, I think we need to rethink that in terms of, like right now in Japan, families are putting their future generations into debt to buy housing. Well, is that fair to into their like great grandchildren and all this? I think that's kind of not ethical. And it's slippery slope considering what's going on right now here. But at what point do we get freedom from the things in the past? At what point do we say, I'm here now and this is my life and I'm taking responsibility for it and I'm going to do the best I can with what I'm working with and try to heal the spiritual wounds and forgive my grandfather for his stuff that may have affected others, but I shouldn't have to pay for his sins. I shouldn't have to pay his debts. Does this make sense?
I would like to think that that is, something that can be agreed on with everyone, because if you think about, all of the wars throughout history, I mean, I'm sure everyone, like you said, how people are descendants from Charlemagne, like how many people are descendants from Charlemagne, or where they say like 4% of the population is a descendant of Genghis Khan or something in like Central Europe and Asia and stuff like that. So the idea of, all of us being involved in war or trauma at some point, and then also if you think about it, not even just from like a spiritual, or I don't know if you're saying like a karmic sort of connection, but also from like a genetic imprinting. They've even found this in science where, if you have generational trauma or, abuse or anything, like if you've gone through something traumatic, that can go through and carry through your genes through like genetic imprinting, they're finding at this point. So I think in a lot of ways everyone is carrying a lot of baggage.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I heard someone the other day bring up the fact that, when people do like past life regressions and talk about, oh, I was Cleopatra or I was some famous person at some point. This person was saying that basically the souls of those individuals were split into millions of pieces, so everyone has a little bit of it. So like on that etheric side, it's possible that a lot of people were Cleopatra, but because they contain a smaller portion of it. It's kind of the same thing, but just not physical. I thought it was interesting. I'll shut up.
It is, yeah, Jerry, it's very interesting. And it's the same thing as when you eat, it's like programmable matter, like crystallized
Like sugar.
structures, hold sugar and salt and all that. They hold energy, and so you can program them, and
Right.
structured water and all that. And also animals, the way they're killed, we bring that forward. But at what point do we personally take responsibility just for ourselves and quit, try to break the chain? You know what I'm saying? This is what I'm saying. I personally feel that I should not okay, here's a good example.
You're not
My
responsible for the sins of your father. Right?
Not,
Yeah.
and well, my mother had Sasquatch.
Got
Oh,
Bigfoot
that
on the
sounds good.
brain.
That's hilarious. Sac Fox Indian from the Midwest in her. And I never once heard her complain about needing it was always like moving forward, and it was always about looking at the past and learning from it and weaving things forward and trying to cut and clear the bad karmic cycles or the bad juju from the past. And there was nothing in her and around my being mothered by her that said she wanted payback. I didn't get that programming. It wasn't in me. Just the same as anyone that may feel she did them bad, I should not, as her child that had nothing to do with her actions, be responsible for her actions. And so this is like a current topic without getting political. I want to bring it above people's but it's a current topic. And my point is, at what point do we claim personal agency and personal sovereignty for the sins of our parents, our parent sins, I should say, parent sins, and be able to move forward. I don't blame or even think about the people that terrorized my mother's people. I don't. I honestly don't. I'm certainly not fixated on it. I'm not even fixated on my own past, outside of apologizing for being a jerk to some people. When I got to that point in my own journey of going, wow, I've been I've been terrible to some people without knowing it. It was my own selfishness. So when I came to that realization, I was like, at that true point, it was not an AA program or whatever they call it. I found out that's a step. I did not know that. So I went to apologize to an
Amends.
ex-boyfriend.
Make
I went
amends.
to apologize to an ex-boyfriend. He's like, did you join AA or something? What's going on?
That's
So
just another mind control cult.
yeah, but that's my point though. Where do we collectively find that we need to understand our past to move forward? And I just was listening to you talk about this in one of your podcasts, like that you released, I don't know, maybe a week ago, I'm not sure. And so we understand our heritage and we understand the lessons of the past so that we may not repeat them. That's a very big deal. And in that process, does it not behoove us to forgive the process and move forward instead of having to feel guilty and do what we can to pay when technically it might be our genetics, but we had nothing to do with it? So I'm posing this to you, Holly. It's just an open-ended question.
Well, I think it ties in with what we were talking about a couple minutes ago with like the idea of a witch hunt, like how guilty is this person, or, causing fear. Like we need to find people to blame or to target, or I think like during the Salem witch trials, they were actually allowed to bring up, stuff that had happened in some of these women's past, and bring it up and dredge up stuff that happened in the past, and said, okay, well, this woman did this to me back then. And, there are men and women accused, but, um, and of course, they had different definitions of what people were guilty of. Did you have a bad crop season, or did someone get cursed or something like that? And they were allowed to, I think, from some of the research people have done with a lot of these families too, that the community was tight knit and it did go back generations. So it was like one family, the Putnams, would have like, they were trying to get the land from this other family, and they were kind of litigious too. So the Puritans were constantly trying to sue each other. So to try to get land, or to try to get, whatever from other people. And so it kind of was a perfect storm of this idea of people blaming each other. And then they were also surrounded by a lot of external stress, just like we're seeing right now. So they had wars, they had like the French and Indian wars that's like what we call them now, but there were a lot of wars to the north between, like you said, the Native Americans and the French and the English and the Dutch. And then also the Puritans in England, there was like the murder of Charles II, and they didn't know if it was going to be like a Catholic king or a Protestant king. And so they didn't even know if their charter was going to be around as like a colony. So they basically were kind of facing lawlessness too. And so maybe another echo to kind of what we're seeing right now. And that just kind of creates this atmosphere of like a witch hunt where it's like, who do we find to blame? You know, who can we scoop up? Who are the people that we can find around us to blame and start pointing fingers?
I think that just goes to the lack of accountability people have these days, and throughout history for the most part.
And especially so we do bring if we talk current times, if if you're being persecuted currently, this is a different matter. So if bad things are happening to you, you should stand up. That's I'm 100 I'm like way into that, and a lot of my art is about that. uh but and I'm all about awareness and trying to have good interactions with people and talk about ideas and not finger point towards people and bring the conversation and the awareness to a level where we can speak to each other without slinging poop on individual names and name calling and all and homonyms and all this. So yes, stand up if you're being oppressed for sure, 100%. I won't back down to that. But so my query here is strictly about when I hear people wanting to be paid for things that happened over 100 years ago, whether it's, one of the things I'm always talking about is the Armenian stuff. I mean, I have so many Armenian friends, and it's like they can't even talk about that in their country. And so the genocide that went on, and uh, it's like we have to find a way to communicate that stops this blame process, and we need to address who and how we're being hurt, but not be find a way to actually see what's going on and not be manipulated by currents that are possibly guiding us towards these manipulations. And that's where it gets tricky. And this is where things start piggybacking. And that's why Salem is a great example, because there's so many factors that went into that with all the stuff that was going on around this to to come revolution, and in the crops failing, people wanting other people's land, pettiness, religious freedoms, the outcasts, all this stuff, all that stuff that goes into the mix. and and then when all is said and done and there's blood on the ground and smoke in the air, uh, and no clarity at all, what do you have? Sometimes you have a greater understanding, but I think it takes time to get that clarity. So if we can look back, and this is what I found really heartfelt in your blog post the other day, when we look back, we can understand these cycles because we find ourselves in one right now. And it's interesting, where are we? This is a tangled mess. And I'm just trying to look at things historically and also trying to move forward and see how can we find common ground again without controlling others, and everyone that gets a little bit of power wants to control the next one down the chain right now, and it's this weird dance. And so what have we learned historically from this? And it seems significant to the research you're doing.
Well, I think there's something kind of weird about America in the way that we have this interesting culture where it's like we have freedoms, and we've got the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and that sort of stuff, and then we also have like this a lot of tension within American culture. And I see the parallels a lot with that with Salem, which was like seemingly a very homogenous culture. All the Puritans, it was like a very some people might call it a cult or like a sect of super specific Protestantism, and they made their way to the United States. And yet, within this group, which was very, tight knit and closely related, they had kind of like what we're seeing right now, which is like a snitch culture. So, the Puritan minister Cotton Mather would say, if there was one sinner amongst you, even if everyone else is a saint, then you're all sinners. So it was kind of like this tattle on your neighbor kind of culture. And so um, I hope we're not really seeing that again in America, but it seems to kind of creep up once in a while where I don't know if it's like an attempt to just control people as a whole, or like the term witch hunt. I mean, we've used that during like the Red Scare of communism. It's kind of, it comes up and kind of surfaces. We use this idea of like a witch hunt as like this idea of trying to, I don't know if it's like purify the society or to dredge up like what you said could be like centuries old uh, grudges, or like you said, genocide, or um, and so many of these people who are dragged into these operations of genocide are children. I mean, basically, if you're talking about warfare, like young boys, young men, people that don't actually know what they're fighting for or who they're killing or what the genocide is about, they're given orders. And you know, here I'm probably getting pretty political for your stream here, but
No, this is all right.
No,
Carry
let's,
on.
just
yeah,
like the idea of, I mean, who ultimately do you blame at the end of that? Whether you have people who look back and are severely traumatized, and we have a large veteran population here in the United States. So, there's just a lot of, I guess, keep using that word trauma, and then that in itself gets weaponized to have people fight amongst each other for whatever reason you want at the time.
Jared's waiting on you.
no, I'm waiting to go back to the Salem Witch Trial book.
What we were just weaving that through, and so with that said, it's I wonder how far backwards we go if so with the current situation and wanting to move forward and wanting to overcome and bring awareness to situations that are not fair, that are not just, and not just for one people's, for everyone. And we can see, if you can see what's going on, you can see what's going on. And but at what point do we say, let's move forward, is what I'm saying. So let's look back and let's see where we've been. Let's look at these other tumultuous times, and we can dot trace that all the way back as far as we want to all the many, many, many struggles. There's so many struggles. Everyone's been under the axe, everyone. And if and this is the problem with people that don't study history, they just don't understand that everyone's been under the axe. And so we have to, I personally feel that to move forward, we do need to know the past. It's like that finger trap, the Chinese finger trap. You got to let in, you got to let go to get out instead of pulling against it. And in the current situation the world finds itself in, not just the United States, the whole world, as everyone's been on lockdown and all this, and we see the bigger picture unfolding, not just in America, on the global stage. I think it's pretty clear to see what's going on if you're really doing some deductive reasoning here and looking through a historic lens. So at what point do we address this and move from here forward, that is in a way that's going to free the folk all over the globe, and and understand the separation between administrations, corporations, and the folk. And because it's clear that it's getting so divisive, that it's always been so divisive, that the folk have been constantly separated by things that are important, yes, because that's what gets people riled up. uh, but those small separations that we're seeing are being manipulated by corporations and institutions, and not by the folk. But the folk in general are following
Mhm.
the stuff that's going on. So do you see a way out of this trap that we're in? And I am speaking globally. I mean, it's clear what's coming through, and this is part of what we briefly talked about, and you brought up, and I talk about this a lot, what you were talking about with, now all of a sudden in Minnesota, they're talking about single family zoning. This is part of a big agenda, and it's moving forward across the whole world. It's a UN thing. It's a United Nations thing, and we, the folk, should at some point try to understand that the language has been turned against us, that beautiful language is being turned against us. And it's like moving through the looking glass, where nothing means anything to us that in the way it did before. Upside down is right side up, etc. So green is not really green. Green is a shackle.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and that's where I wanted to kind of, it all ties together, and you tie it together so well.
Well, I think you've made like some awesome points there. Like the idea of like plans, like we can talk about history and like what actually happened or what could have happened or what should have happened. And I did a video the other day talking about how Minnesota, in Minneapolis, they just so happen to have a 500-page document called Agenda 2040. So they, whoever's putting this together, UN, like you said, elites, whatever we want to call them, it, people have 40, 50-year plans in the works. They've dreamed up what they want, what they need for them to be able to continue, the game that they've been running, the gambit, if you will, um, using most people around the world as pawns, right? So they've got their collective dreams about Agenda 2040. They want to get rid of every single family home in the Minneapolis neighborhood, and have like the condensed housing, that sort of stuff, getting people living in apartments again, and they're zoning it so that it falls into this idea of renewable energy or sustainable living is kind of what they're saying, sustainable living. So getting rid of, yards and everything like that. So they've got these plans of smart cities hooked up to these grids. I think we need to start looking at our collective dreams. What do we want to see? And I think that we've been really stifled to think about the idea of dreaming, particularly anything that's positive. So if you think about popular culture, movies, film, TV, whatever, it's been super negative for a long time. It's really been dystopian. I mean, I think maybe in the 1950s they did like some cool futuristic films about, flying cars and like Jetsons type stuff. But if you think about it, movies, everything now, it's like, there was probably like 10 years ago, there was like the huge zombie apocalypse theme that they played for every single movie, TV show. It was just massive, like that trend. And then
Yep.
people have mirrored a lot of, well, what's going on recently, up until a few days ago when the mainstream media narrative shifted. This idea of like contagion or, like all these pandemic movies and films, and this is what's going to happen. And I went to public school in the early 2000s, and it was all like, we had to read The Hot Zone about Ebola and this,
That was a good book.
it was a good book. I did. I mean, I was into it. I mean, I was interested in virology and that sort of stuff, and I think that that kind of has become helpful considering like what we've been going through now. But you can definitely see a lot of the programming. Like we've been programmed to think of everything is just gonna suck, you know? And I think that maybe collectively start dreaming about how we can actually make things better. And I think we've even been programmed to think that that's not fun to do so. Like it's easier or just more cool to think in dystopian terms than to think of like taking, like you said, like personal responsibility. You know, this could be an opportunity to rethink our food supply or rethink, you know, not necessarily in a smart city sort of way, but in a way that actually works for people.
I've been, yeah, this is one of the things I was just, my voice is so shot. I've been on radio shows and other shows all like for the last 2 weeks and no voice. I apologize. Uh, if I sound like Stevie Nicks, I can't control it.
No, you sound
Anyway,
fine. You sound fine.
thanks, Jared. But this is one of the things I think that with this, the food shortage that is looming, whether manipulated or not, and those are rabbit holes that are really fun to go down. But one of the things that's come to light is, I think, with the meat industry, it's it's I think I've been thinking for a long time we needed to rethink how we treat the animals. I'm not pushing anyone's agenda. You do what you want to do. I am definitely all about free choice. And even with meat, that's your own thing. But I do think that it's a matter of the quality of the life. Nothing should have to suffer for you to eat it. And so those big plants that have been closing, I personally think it's a good thing because their practices have been appalling. And as we were talking about earlier, we take on that programming. And so if we could at least come into smaller, like look at how great the Amish do with their animals. Those animals live really great lives. That's why their products taste so good. I always love shopping at an Amish store. You can taste the difference. You literally can taste the difference. And so I think that's one of the good things to come out of this is the awareness of, well, okay, this is getting shut down. I think the point is not to bring us that awareness. I think the point is to control us by food. But if we can get some awareness, which brings into practice smaller farming, right? All over, lots of smaller farming for animals where it's more local. And that's the good side of these, sadly, the memed terms, agendas, 21, 20, 30, 2040, whatever they are now, because they do have shifted, then that's a good thing. But locking us into these grids is the downside, and taking away the ability to have a house and a garden. This is, to me, very nefarious. I enjoy having a house. I enjoy having a garden and permaculture, and and I would be very offended if somebody coming to my door saying, I am no longer allowed to do that which I have worked for, uh, and that I must relinquish it for the good of all. Well, I've been doing good and living a better type of lifestyle and in connection to the supplies and stuff I use. Again, this comes back and ties into the sins of our parents and the sins of others. Sorry. And so where do we collectively draw lines here? Because this agenda that's getting rolled out in Minneapolis is set for every town USA. It's set for Portland, set for San Francisco next, all the ones you expect. Seattle, New York City. It's set in all over the world. So that Paris, we're talking everywhere.
All the
And
communist places.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's kind of what it is. And and so for me, like that's a reason to stand up. There's a lot of reasons to stand up, but when we start telling people how to live, is this not crossing a line? Is this not crossing a line? And so, yes, the good things that are coming out are awareness, but awareness of certain practices that are happening. But how are they spinning that? You know, the green thing is being spun into a very ugly thing where you can't do certain things. If you're practicing permaculture, I'm going to postulate that you're actually kind of being very green, right, in the terms of living that kind of sustainable life. But in the legal terms I'm seeing in these papers in cities, and in my city too, and in those big huge documents like you're talking about in Minnesota, that's a 500-page document that's all legally written, it's actually nefarious and full of binds and binding, and it's like word spells all the way through that only equal, and I hate to use the word, slavery.
Yeah, I think that's exactly kind of like the plan of honestly, and but they need people's complacency, right? Like they need complicity and they need complacency. So it's a spell, right? So um and when we talk about these mega cities, to get esoteric, I mean, this is something that's been tried many times. They call it Babylon, whatever you want to talk about. Atlantis, why did something so big collapse? Babylon, why did something so big collapse? And it ultimately consumes itself. And the idea of having these mega cities, if they're not done sustainably, in a real way, and you're talking about factory farms or these big giant slaughterhouses. People have been doing exposés about these factory farms and slaughterhouses for what, a couple of decades now in the United States. And if you expose this, you are labeled an eco-terrorist. You're put in jail if you expose like what was actually going on with farming and the genetically modified organisms, whatever. Just this idea of turning this into a weapon, like these foods into weapons. So yeah, I think you're right. I think in a way, like with these major factory farms, of course, it's unfortunate that they're collapsing right at this time where our economy, all these things seem kind of precarious. What could happen to the food supply, logistics systems being shut down for whatever reason. But people need to take, like you said, some responsibility. We've got many people who are unemployed right now. We've got opportunity if they can have access to land to actually start farming again. And I think that is a huge opportunity if we can envision that for ourselves and move forward. And I grew up thinking that oh, more college was the answer. That's how you get a better job. Just don't worry about the student loan debt. Don't worry. You'll find a great job. Blah blah blah. 2008 recession, Great Recession hits. There's no jobs. You've got tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. What am I going to do? Am I going to blame everyone around me? Am I going to, be upset that I was told, I could get a job, that sort of stuff? Am I going to try to re-envision my life going forward? And that's what people have had to do. I mean, this idea specifically where college would be the way for everyone to get out of what we've created as a society, this stratification. And there's a great book called, I think it's called Unmasking the Green Agenda by a woman named Rosa Corey. And she and her wife actually bought a house in California, and they started to go to some of these, green sustainability revisioning meetings. And they quickly learned that it was a greater agenda, basically, like you said, to get people out of their homes and kind of guilt trip people into thinking that, you're uh, just a consumer. You have to scale down. And if you've seen what's gone on in California, they're putting taxes on water. They're limiting how much water you can use. You can't use more than 50 gallons a day. They're going to start trying to enforce this, and they'll heavily tax people. And I think it's kind of strange how this inversion has kind of happened. And like you said, something like permaculture, I mean, you're only helping other people. You're helping the environment. You're teaching people how to actually not impact the planet. I think we're starting to see the mask of some of these agendas to come off, I guess. And I think that that's in many ways we're seeing an unmasking.
It's been a slow unmasking of everything, I think, for the last couple of years. A lot of like the bias in all these institutions that we've trusted to be objective has really shown its true colors.
Yeah, and I think people have given that up, like, oh, we can just, elect or vote our way out of, whatever sort of problems we've created or whoever's created. And like you mentioned the intro, I had served in local office for a few
Hmm.
years and I was like, oh, I'm going to change the world, I'm going to do this and that. And then just completely butting my head up against the system and just seeing the shenanigans, even at a local level. So,
Yeah.
I don't really think we can just vote our way out of stuff. People have to start taking it, and if you say, oh, we got to take personal responsibility, then you're like a crazy conservative. So I'm really hoping that these labels are starting to slide off. And I do think that they are because, common sense is common sense. And hopefully, I always am asking myself, it's like, how bad do things have to get before people like wake up? And I hope it's not really that bad. I hope people wake up before it does get bad. And like you said about generational trauma or generational oppression, maybe we carry some of that with us, and maybe that's why people get triggered. Hopefully, we can be like a canary in a coal mine and say, hey, wait, didn't I live through this before? Or didn't my family live through something like this before? Like let's turn it around. Let's steer the ship a different way. So I think with these big agendas that they have in the works 50, 100 years ahead of time, we can actually work in the moment and kind of dance around what these big uh, long-term plans are. We can actually throw a wrench in it and steer it. Like you said, they keep having to change it. It used to be Agenda 2020 or something, and now it's 2040 or 2050. They do have to push it back because it's not happening as fast as they thought it would be. So I think that is a good thing.
Yep, I totally agree. It's the tribalism has to go.
Yeah, I
Well,
think that's been a spell in and of itself, like, oh, pick a color and vote, I think that's it's weird. It's like a sports game or like a wrestling match or something. People need to wake up.
right, and you're horrible if you don't vote the way they vote. You're the
Well, I think
absolute
the
worst person.
2016 election showed that. I mean, that it was horrible. I mean, I got off Facebook. I got off a lot of social media off that because I realized it was like destroying my relationships with family and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And what is that really worth it? I mean, people were at each other's throats
yeah.
over it. I mean, the psyop, if you will, was successful in that way, if nothing else.
Yep, I've totally had to unfollow like all my friends on Facebook and some of my family too. They're just lunatics.
But this is kind of what I was talking about. This is what's sad, is that I think we should allow each other the right to feel and think what they want, as long as it's not we're not hurting each other, and bad things aren't, like there's a lot of stuff in the world that I'm just not having at all. And there's a lot of different like religious teachings where I literally am everything they would consider the devil. Like I represent like everything that some religions just think are completely the worst of the worst. And so I allow them that right as long as they don't infringe those rules upon me and I don't get punished for those rules. And I think that's a greater lesson that we're seeing right now with the stuff that's going on. We should be able to all inhabit our flesh and experience this ride and not worry about ideologies and silly things. In the end, if you step above and outside of your life, outside of your flesh, your body, your suit, your car, and look from more of an omniscient viewpoint, and if we could find the commonality, then I think we can, ease this finger lock we're in. Uh, but pushing further into it, or pulling apart, it's like we're in a trap. I mean, we're just literally in a trap. And I have a rebel gene. I was just born with it. And so I it's easy for me to rebel against any constraints coming on me. I'm like, no, I get a dollar and 60% of 60 cents on my dollars going out of my hand, or whatever, 10 cents. You should ask for permission, and I should be able to donate that to you instead of you thugging your way into my life and telling me you're taking it or I'm going to this prison or that one. Like that's my rebel gene, and that's what riles me up. Those kinds of shackles. I'm not chattel. I wasn't raised to be, and I'm not. And I think a lot of people feel this way, and on all sides, and for different things and different reasons. And we all uh, get in, empowered within that feeling of I'm here and I'm walking and I'm holding my space, and that I love to see. I just don't like I don't understand. Is that your baby?
Yeah, I think she just woke up.
Well, if you need to take a break, it's fine.
I might check on her in a minute, but
And
she's
so
with her daddy right now. So
oh, Papa. So, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I just wish that we could. It's a wish, a dream I have, that we could find ways to communicate and see each other in a more free way, and stop. I know it's idealistic, and stop hurting each other over things that are ridiculous. And when I look around, it's this control grid. It's not people, it's the control grid.
It's the first time we've had a baby on the show.
I'm loving it.
I wonder if I have to mark this as there's kids involved now
And the dog too.
in the YouTube settings.
Holly has a 8-month-old baby, everyone.
No, she's not on camera.
yeah, no, I'm not on camera. My mic's still on. Sorry, I thought I muted it.
It's all good.
It's all right.
So I would give a shout out to everyone in chat. There's the regulars, Grimsteak, Lady Boshi's here. Hey, Lady Boshi. Suzanne Rivers, Sky Balancer.
Oh, hello, everyone.
And some new
I'm looking
people.
over now. I had to click away from our Zoom. Oh, Modwiz, hello.
Yep, Radagast is here.
Excellent. Suzanne.
We're talking about an Atlanta
David
meetup.
C. Rivers. Excellent. It's nice to see everyone.
It's great to be back on our main channel again.
Yes, we're so happy to be back. We are out of the corner.
Yes,
Sky
I
Balancer.
was trying to think of a way to say that eloquently on Twitter today, that we're out of the doghouse or whatever. But that was the
Yeah, trigger.
the image I had in my head was we were in a corner. It's so
Right,
weird
with
that you
the-
said
with the
that.
hat. I know.
Hey, JJ's here.
JJ, CC Poo. Yeah, it's so that's where I'm like, Jerry, have you seen? I mean, since we're talking about all this anyway, without trying to get low with it, but have you seen the people in costumes? It's tickling me. The Batman guy.
Yeah, yes, I saw Batman.
Because I've been calling it Gotham's real, this whole thing.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden I saw Batman, I saw someone in a Joker mask, because it's that surreal that, and it's the symbols. These symbols are so potent. And then when you look at anything that's going on, it's so deeply symbolic that it's affecting us and our collective in such a big way. And of course, it's got all that emotionality to it. And so I'm like, where are the villains and where are the heroes? We know who they are, but to see just some people, and I want to see some Marvel costumes.
Have you seen my costume yet?
No, I haven't. Oh yes, that was your sidekick in your car, Guy Fawkes.
Yes.
Remember.
I just watched that movie again, and if you haven't seen it, I don't know if it's back on Netflix or it's been there and hidden, but whatever. It's on Netflix right now, and it's very poignant to what's going on today, believe it or not.
Yes.
It
Extremely.
starts with a virus that kills a bunch of people, which leads to totalitarian government.
I forgot about the virus.
Yeah, I know. So did I.
Oh my.
If you haven't seen V for Vendetta yet, check it out. It's a very, very good movie.
How did I forget about the virus part?
I forgot about it too, because it's only a small part. It's more about human experimentation.
Yeah. Well, there's like the book burning and all that stuff that goes on, right? Where
there's a complete destruction of history.
Yeah. Yes.
Which we're seeing right now. In fact, I just read that I don't remember where it was, Raleigh, I think. Wherever there's a statue of General Lee that they're going to take down now.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you know how I feel. I think all the monuments of the past should be there as reminders, if nothing else. Like we need to know, we need to remember, we can't hide stuff. That's why I was sad when I see in like the Middle East, all the Egyptian stuff getting blown up, and
Palmyra
this is doing no one a favor historically, trying to understand our footprints through time and where we've been so that we can understand the cyclical nature of things. But as Holly's been saying, these 50-year agendas, but this particular one, it feels like 100 years ago. Smith was writing about this, Blavatsky was talking about this, a lot of people were talking about this kind of where we are now. And planning in the Chinese plan for a century out, traditionally,
right.
You plant trees in permaculture. You just in permaculture alone, I planted ginkgo trees for people in 100 years from now. They're that slow growers. So you think about planting a tree for someone in the next 100 year, the next century over.
Is my mic back on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was listening to you all here. So great stuff. Great points.
I wanted to throw in here about the permaculture angle, that over the last 10 years, I've seen a lot of municipalities, city states, whatever, outlaw things that you could use towards permaculture, like collecting rainwater or gardens in your yard and shit like that. Having chickens, you can't do that in a lot of places, especially if you're close to a city. If you're in a city, there's no way you're going to have chickens in an apartment building, but you know what I mean.
Well, in Portland, you can have chickens and goats and stuff. Some cities allow it, but there's the thing, like there's all kinds of practices. So in permaculture, nothing goes off out of the property. Sticks that fall down, grass clippings, all the sticks get piled and used in hugel mounds, which make your soil more loomy, which then holds more water, and you can grow. You don't have to water. I have hugel mounds that when we used to have warmer summers here, I didn't have to water anything that was on them, because the sticks and everything that had fallen down that I'd put in there and built those hugel mounds up with. For anyone who doesn't know what they are, there's different dogmas around it. It's basically putting wood into the ground, layering it with maybe some other natural debris, leaves and stuff, and burying it. And it then decays underground and it holds a lot of water, and you can You don't have to water through droughts. So nothing goes off the property. All the clippings stay, all the leaves from fall, and it just continues to make better soil, which makes worms want to be there and all that. This is a great principle, but it should not be weaponized. That's what we're seeing. It's get the language around it is weaponizing it
Right.
because of the terminology of green. Green to me has now turned into a very ugly, weaponized word. I know exactly what that means legally now.
Right.
And Holly talks about this.
And it's been co-opted. I mean, it's just like the climate change movement. You see, I'm doing air quotes for anyone who can't see me, which is everybody.
It's sad. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
I muted you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, thank
Yes.
you.
Jump in, please,
I thought
Holly,
I
if you're
hit the
able
mute
to.
earlier. Yeah, so I think you're totally right about the green movement, and I was really sad about that. Actually, when I served in office, I was a registered Maine Green Independent, and it was just crazy to see like the um, the infiltration that came in, and how like we've talked about before, just the inversion that comes out of that. So you take people's well-intentioned ideas about how they want to create the future, and they completely flip it. And so like this idea of carbon credits or something like that, you need to get taxed. You have to tax the little guy on how much water, like you said, can't collect rainwater anymore, or you're gonna have to get taxed on it, or they've got smart meters for how much water you use, etc., that sort of thing. And the inversion of that versus not actually addressing like the pollution. I'm in Michigan now, and it's just so common, the idea about like Kalamazoo and Flint. People still can't drink clean water. They shut down the whole state because of a pandemic, but they could have paved the roads during that time. They could have fixed Flint's water during that time. Where
Imagine
does
how many
this money
5G
go?
towers they could have put up in that time.
Exactly. Yeah. They're working hard on some things, right?
Yeah,
But
true.
the other things, it's just completely pushed off to the wayside, and we have to redream that, reimagine that. And like you said, I'm glad you brought up like Blavatsky, and I think Albert Pike is another person
Yep.
people should really look into. With, the idea of the three world wars. And I hate to think of it this way, but it's like they really are trying to start like a World War III in so many ways right now. And
Oh,
a
they got to
lot of
make.
that, like
Sorry,
hmm,
that was
well,
because they
like
got to
you
make way for the coming race.
whatever,
Yeah.
the plan to AI, everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's the coming race.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, that's the
That's
whole
a good way to put it.
It's the transhumanism movement. The Coming Race was a book by, I forget the guy's name who wrote it, but that was basically the precursor to the whole theosophy movement.
Well, that is a slave race. I mean, if you think about AI, I mean, they don't want AI thinking, for itself, or wanting independence, or they expect it to be automated. That's their dream, and I do wonder right now if what we're seeing right now with these different events, I'm putting in air quotes as well, we're seeing these events. I've talked to or wondered if a lot of this is like an AI algorithm that they're playing on people right now to see like how we're going to react. What are people going to do? What percentage of people are going to do something? And they use our smartphones and all that sort of stuff. And of course, online to see like the idea of social tracking, social credit system to kind of see how people are going to react. And this idea, like you said, the technocrats, Blavatsky, Pike, a lot of people have said, this is what's coming down the road for people, and or what they want anyway. And I think all this could be subject to change at any given moment if people just start saying no, and doing it constructively, though, not like turning against each other and destroying each other.
Yeah, but people can't give up their iPhones. Have you?
Well,
I'm sorry.
It's hard. I have one. I've got a smartphone, and it's like every week I keep talking about how I want to go back to landline. It's
Yeah.
like, when am I actually do it?
But you can't get a landline anymore. You got to go
I
through.
know, we'll have to go to CVs or something.
I mean, the plain old telephone system, the POTS lines are still out there, but I don't think you can get one as a consumer. And the contact tracing, blah blah blah, is not only part of Agenda 30, but it's part of the Rockefeller lockstep plan too.
Oh, that lockstep stuff. Ooh
Yeah,
wee.
that's some creepy
Yeah.
shit.
Could feel it. Are you familiar with that, Holly?
Um, Actually, not really. I mean, there's so many of them right now, and I've heard people mention it, but I don't know if that's tied in. I mean, they're doing it in other countries as far as like social credit, um, and you can't go to certain areas, you can't work certain jobs. They gotta monitor what you think and do and say, tied in with the basically use technology, and that's kind of why they need the 5G to do that as well.
Jerry, can you fill people in on lockstep so everyone kind of gets on the same page?
Yeah, it's I don't know the full details. I haven't read it in a while, but basically, it's similar to the Event 201 that happened in October with the coronavirus pandemic. It actually talks about a coronavirus pandemic and the response that would come from it. And the list of issues in this lockstep program is there's a virus or pandemic with a high contagion and high mortality. The health systems are overwhelmed. Uh, in the lockstep, it was the young people who were killed off, not the older people. Economies are devastated. International mobility of people and goods severely impeded. I'm reading this list now. Tourism is suspended. Global supply chains interrupted. Retail establishments shut down. Lack of containment protocols in developing countries. Non-authoritarian response of U.S. government fails. Authoritarian Chinese approach works much better. Other nations emulate authoritarian, high surveillance Chinese approach. Endurance of more authoritarian rule after pandemic. Shocked populations, of course, welcoming more surveillance and authoritarian rule. And of course, biometric IDs were a big part of it. So it's basically what we've seen play out and then some.
Well, that sounds like a conspiracy theory.
It's not. It's absolutely not.
She's joking.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I got dry humor.
No,
I mean, what can you do but laugh? I mean, like,
I know. I love
coincidence
it.
theory, I guess, is what it's called. I don't know.
The what?
Coincidence theory.
You're right.
Just,
The duh theory. It's we're looking at it all right now, and that's what's making this is what's making everything so surreal, is noticing the I'm constantly kind of in awe. I've been in awe of how all this is rolling out. I think if you're looking at this from the perspective of what you want, and you've been social engineering, or from groups within groups that think on that level. And again, I like using the Chinese model because it's such an old country that is very organized. It's always been very organized. It's got a long history of it, and they think well into the future. And like I said earlier, with Japanese, putting their great grandchildren into debt to get small housing, and where the current ones that are basically signing up their future family, their future kin, into kind of a slavery for this space to feel that they're doing them a good service. It's a good thing, but that's, of course, that's coming from where they stand now, without that understanding of what the future holds and how that unfolds. Well, when the Chinese plan in 100-year swatches, this is long-term thinking. This is beyond your life. And and it's real, like we mentioned Blavatsky, and I mean, the literature is all out there. That's the thing about this, is none of this is conspiratorial. This is all out there. So when I look around right now, that's what I see. I'm seeing fulfillment of plans, and I'm seeing them come into fruition. And whereas we're now seeing how nasty it can be played, we're now seeing how ruthless it is, and how divisive this is getting down on the bottom level, with pitting people against people. And when people were just starting to come together, this is what I want to say. When it seemed like people were just starting to come together, I'm loving the yellow vest movement and all this. When there was cohesion, then what gets thrown in, and it's a constant divide and conquer. And these are old school ways of thinking about takeover, about war. And if we can detach ourselves from it seems to me, if we could detach ourselves from emotionality of the moment and try and think clearly, and just put the emotions aside for a minute and think clearly to assess a situation and pull in the information and data and talk to other people that may not share the same views as you, and get a bigger picture of what's going on instead of fighting each other, I think some of these answers and some of the players would look more clear and obvious. But instead, everyone's against everyone now. And there's not going to, except for the people that started this ball rolling. That's my observation.
I do think we've hit critical mass, though. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm an optimist or something, but I do feel like you can talk to some people about some of these things a lot more openly than maybe even like a year ago. Maybe it's just um, my worldview, and that could be difficult because like online, I know they start to generate things where you only see what they think you want to see too. Like they can manipulate the algorithm. But I was actually I got a phone call from my mother the other day, and she said that some woman, and this is in like a small town of like a few thousand people, a woman walked up to her and she was like, you know, be careful about, 5G or whatever, and this Bill Gates and his plans and this and that. And like, I don't know exactly what she said to my mother, but my mom actually started to like question stuff. And she's like, this is things, that you talk about. And, she's like, I didn't really know what to think about it. But the fact that if like some old woman is coming up to my mother and telling her, like, warning her on the street about whatever she thinks is a conspiracy theory at the time, that actually kind of gives me hope that she'll at least start to look into it maybe. I do think you can't really stuff this stuff back into a box, like once people have actually seen like, hey, are we being manipulated here on a massive scale? I don't know, could be.
Yeah, I,
What?
I, I definitely think we can find, I think lots, that's what I'm saying, is I think we were starting to actually have conversations, but part of what's going on right now is I think we're backstepping a bit, where everyone's fighting everyone now. Like right now, I started to see, and I had to step back from Twitter at least, people are like, get the hell off my stream, like families,
Yeah.
they're just like, I
Unfollow
can't
me
talk to
if
you.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
if this and that, and that's not conducive to anything. I understand.
The worst part of that is the people who say that, oh, if you think like for instance, hydroxychloroquine is good for you or good for this virus, just unfriend me right now. These people are so uninformed
Well,
because they're
it
only
doesn't
what I've noticed is they only listen to their trusted media source they go to every day.
but
And
so but
yeah,
whether or not, see, but that language alone, uninformed, it is, they can feel, and they can have conviction in what they're how they're coming to their conclusions. I feel it's all right. And the sad thing to me is when we just stop talking because you've come to this conclusion, and possibly I've come to this conclusion, and now we see no bridge, and yet we've got a 20-year friendship, or you're my mom, or you're my cousin, or you're my coworker. We can't talk. This is scorched sand. And that's what I'm seeing. um
Yeah, yeah. At Christmas time, I had my parents, well, my dad mainly, raged out at me about how Trump was horrible and blah 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 and all this. I'm like, dude, you're just repeating talking points from MSNBC. What do what's wrong with you?
but to me, they all are horrible. So it's like the whole game is rigged to me,
I
and
agree.
that's also heretical. So we should be able to, I remain hopeful that we can find a common ground, and still not yell at each other and want to kill each other and want to cut off relationships, and maybe get back to ideas and start addressing and follow the plans. So like with the 2030, 2040 stuff, follow the plan. What who
Trust the
is
plan.
saying,
Trust the plan.
Jerry, is that the Q stuff?
Yeah, well, that's what you were talking about.
No, I'm not Q. I barely know that. um
We're
I
not
don't follow.
Q-tards here, so
No.
just
Well,
FYI.
see, but saying Q-tard even, like, they can follow Q. I don't, it's all right. You can follow Q. I don't, and I don't really know much about it because I don't follow it. So, but I'm saying follow the plans that are happening, the stuff that are in Minneapolis right now, where they're putting into action banning single family zoning. Follow that plan. Where is that going? Where did that stem from? What's the root of that? Well, that stems from a UN agenda that has a lot of different world leaders signing on to that, and how they want to get us into no one has their own property, and you only get to live in two, I think, what is it, 1,200 square feet per person or something. It's intense when you start looking at the documentation. And one of the people I do follow is Deborah Tavares, and I think she does a great service to people, where it's just bringing awareness. So that's what I'm talking about. If we could find our conversations, if we could find common ground without triggering each other, I think we could get ahead here, because there are entities called corporations that are enacting nasty things on behalf of us citizens, on behalf of us, of the folk, that are going to affect us, that are affecting us right now, and our children. And it is the real iron boot to the face. Meanwhile, all we're doing is giving more reason for a tighter clampdown when we're fighting each other in the streets. We should be fighting them,
Well,
the
the more we
organizations.
fight each other, the less attention we pay to them. Look what's going on right now while these riots or protests are going on. There's Rod Rosenstein is being deposed in Congress. The Clinton thing that Holly reported on today. Do you want to talk about that, Holly?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, anytime there's something huge in the media, you gotta look around and be like, okay, well, what is that
Yep.
covering up? Like,
Yep.
what is this? What is actually going on here? And like the idea, like you said, just quickly wanted to mention about like masks, like literally muzzling ourselves at this point, like when you're in public. So
Yes.
the only way that
Yes.
you can communicate is like online, or stay at home, like safer alone, that sort of thing, and the idea
It's
of
like, shut up,
muzzling.
shut up.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And it's also kind of like a ritual almost too. It's like it's kind of complicity, signing on to a bigger agenda without even really knowing this idea of they talk about the new norm, the new normal, and really pushing that in people's idea about you're just going to wear a mask indefinitely in public and just muzzle yourself. And even not even being able to smile at people. You don't even know like what people are thinking when you see people in public now. So it's like everyone looks weird now when if you know if you're wearing a mask. So like you said, that this idea of mentioning the Clinton depositions, all this sort of stuff where it's like the gears of justice grind so slow, and meanwhile the gears of confusion and disinformation, everything just grinds so fast lately now. The idea of like a news story, you know, completely everything can change in a day, and whereas it used to be things could take weeks or months or years for things to change or news to get out, and now I think we really are seeing this idea of this technology, these smartphones, that sort of stuff, just being weaponized against us now. It kind of sucks because it's like they're making it more and more indispensable at the same time, where we're starting to see how they are tools for manipulation.
And
And the
control.
idea control, yeah, and then the idea of like, oh, we're just gonna have kids, you know, you're just gonna use an iPad and you're gonna learn everything online, you know, or don't even go to school anymore, it's too dangerous, or if you go back to school you have to wear a mask all day. I mean,
And six feet
people,
apart.
yeah, I mean, this is absolutely insane, and I think they're just gonna try to push it as far as they can and then see if people say no or not. I think that's kind of at the point that we're at. They're kind of grasping for straws just to see if reality can be completely shattered and if we'll just go along with it.
The worst part of that is the politicization of the agreeing with or not agreeing with those directives. Um, like right now, pretty much, if you refuse to wear a mask, you're going to be labeled as a conservative or a Trump supporter
We're dangerous,
or
you know.
dangerous. And for that, what you were talking about, how the information changes. So many things have changed in the last week. We've seen the retraction of the study that said the hydroxychloroquine was bad, right? So that's now up in the air. Nobody knows, is it good or bad? Who knows? We don't know, because all the information about it being good has been scrubbed, and now they're saying, oh, it's bad. The idea of wearing masks was bad at first, then it was good, then it was mandatory, and now it's, well, it's not good. It's going to make you sicker if you wear a mask. So there's confusion, and there's no one good source of truth anymore. And
That's it. That's the biggest thing here,
yeah,
is that we're getting, you know, air quotes again, truth pushed to us from all these different angles, as always, and then the angles we're indoctrinated into believing are the official ones have backskirted so many times, forwards, backwards, and it's just this big mind fuck.
it's whiplash.
And it is totally. And of course, there's something in me that thinks that's all intentional. It's like a hypnosis of sorts. It's a way to get people worn out.
It's the pendulum swinging back and forth in front of your face.
Absolutely. And they're just worn out and just want to get on already, you know, that whole thing. And and then you know, then we have all kinds of strange fuckery with numbers, and what is this technically, what's this, you know, what's a virus technically, what is this language technically. So there's this constant, you know, it's classic warfare where you get worn out. It's death by a thousand cuts, in essence, and another way of doing it, a psychological way of doing it.
Oh, yeah, this is totally psychological warfare on every level.
I think they have to do it that way because I think, you know, there's so many people on the planet now too, that where it's like,
Allegedly.
yeah, right. So this idea that the masses probably, honestly, probably couldn't be controlled if they just wanted to go, you know, uh, hard on people, and and instead they're just wearing people down, like you said, psychologically, till we're just like, just make it stop. We'll do whatever. Just make it stop. So
Right, right.
I I think from like a spiritual um, perspective, we need to build a spiritual shell, and reconnect with that in whatever way you can or however you do that. And I don't know whether it's reconnecting with nature or family or God or, and try to get away from this culture that's been shoved down our throats, which is pretty obviously toxic at this point. And, maybe look at it and examine it and think about it critically. I mean, that's probably the best way to try to absorb or devour this type of stuff nowadays. But I think stress wears people down too. I mean, the stress of all this, all these people who weren't quote unquote woke to some of this stuff before, must be going through hell right now if they suddenly are going through a crash course and all this.
Yeah, if they even are.
Yeah, it'd be a tough time to just suddenly become woke, whatever that means. It would be, I feel bad for people.
Hopefully they don't start on flat Earth.
Yeah, it would
Well,
be a tough.
I keep hoping that like one of the things that I thought was a silver lining in some of this, at least before the the stuff that's going on right now, was that everyone started to see the fuckery that was going on with the numbers game and this back and forth information from the administration's uh, task force, if you will.
The fuckery continues to this day. I mean, the media is still reporting over 100,000 people have died from COVID, when in fact the CDC, I'll get the number right now.
Yeah, CDC's numbers are totally different.
Yes. Where is that number?
And they retracted. The CDC retracted.
Total COVID deaths right now at 88,000 on the CDC's website as of June 3rd. So why is the media reporting it as over 100,000?
And then, well, then you just cross-analyze that with other causes of death, and then you weigh out, well, does this warrant a world lockdown? Hello,
Yeah,
and
no, it does not.
Yeah, and so this is the thing that I think was bringing people to question what is really going on, whether or not you wanted to buy into the idea that this is a super scary virus that could come and get you. When people started to look at this logically in terms of a world lockdown and cross examine it with numbers of other very common things, that's when I started to see people around me that would never question anything coming from those in apparent power and what they should and shouldn't do, going, oh my God, what this isn't making sense. A lot of mothers I know were like, because they're in mama bear mode, they're trying to protect their babies, were like, oh, terrified for their children. And then when they started to see that nothing was adding up, and that there was some other something coming down the line with it, that's when I started to see actual mothers banding together and like having little groups of discussion about what's going on here, that we're completely following the narrative and the script.
And don't forget about all the guilt that's been laid on people who were denied it or questioned it even.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can't question. I mean, you're always going to be. We're outsiders, so we just naturally question things around us. That's just how we are, and I personally think that's a good way to be. But you be how you want to be. I like to,
right. But this goes to Holly's point about being a critical thinker.
Yeah.
How can you be a critical thinker in today's toxic environments when you're constantly berated and denigrated and chastised for even asking a question about what the quote unquote authorities have said? That's the problem. I think that's the biggest issue we're going to face going forward as critical thinkers.
It looks like you want to speak, Holly.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just did want to mention quickly this idea of the Smith-Mundt Act, which was put in after World War II,
Yep. Obama
to
changed it.
basically, yeah, to basically repeal propaganda within the United States
Hmm.
put forward by like foreign relations, State Department, Broadcasting Board of Governors, and then in 2012 it was basically repealed or revamped, as they call it, under the NDAA. So people need to be aware now that it's not, you know, uh, the mainstream media, everything that you see on TV, everything, they can lie to you about anything now at this point. There's nothing holding back on any of this. So,
I was
critical
so
thinking.
appalled,
Just watch
Holly, when that went
CNN. I mean, you
through.
could tell that's true.
I was so appalled. I put that was my last step with Facebook. When that went in, and I was like, if you cannot see this is a terrible thing. I wasn't like, unfriend me. I was like, I'm leaving Facebook.
Well, it's
Like,
just dangerous at that point. It really is. I mean, it's dangerous because most people are, good people, and they're believing, and they themselves are truthful. So they can't even fathom like the shenanigans, I'll call it that, people will go, the lengths that people will go in power, to deceive and to be evil, frankly. And most people are just so good and kind-hearted that they can't even fathom something like that. So you can't really ask for critical thinking in that sort of way when there really isn't any sort of limits to the depths that some people will do to use psychological operations and stuff that they've been perfecting for centuries. So tried and true stuff like we're seeing right now, like a plague, like fires, riots, famine,
yeah,
all
yeah.
this sort of stuff, like old school playbook type stuff that they're going to try to throw at us. And I'm just hoping, I'm glad I was on here tonight, and like just people talking, just getting the word out to anyone that will listen at this point, just being like, look, spend a minute, like you said, to start to reflect and use some critical thinking, and stop fighting with friends and family if you can, because it's,
And,
what else are you going to do?
and go to the source. This is one of the things I've been saying for years and years and years. Turn the news off and go to the source. If you want to know what this president or that president or that president did, don't listen to what they're saying. Look at where their signatures are. Go to whitehouse.gov and see where they put their signatures. The rest should not matter. The rest is a show. People do not want to read. They don't want to read. And some of these documents, like the universal health care here, the Obamacare thing, was 15. I read through that. It was like over 1,500 pages. I read through every page. And at first I'm like, oh, it sounds great, blah, blah, blah. This was one of my transformations from thinking things were better in that administration to thinking things were going very bad. When I read through that, and I was like, oh my God, it's a tax. I couldn't believe it. Everyone around me at that time, I was, cutting and pasting. I'm like, look at this clause. I was married to a lawyer, and there's a lot of legal people in my family. So I'm familiar with some of the legal jargon. And, I was just so appalled by it. And yet it was under this really great package. It was wrapped so well, kind of. But then one of the things that was like they pushed it through in what, 24 hours. There's not enough time to read it, that's for sure. And so that's my point. Go to the source, see where the signatures are, see who backs those people with those signatures, and think like a journalist. And it's not always about following the money. I'm sorry. I know that's an old school thing. It's a very good policy, but some things, if you're just following the money, sometimes you're going to miss some of the best breadcrumbs. There's more to kickbacks than money. And so that's one of my biggest pearls of wisdom for people. Follow the signatures. Hello.
I'm waiting for someone to talk.
I will
Sorry.
definitely have to think about. I was just thinking about what you're saying, though. I mean, that's a great point because I've heard, think of the follow the money all the time, but yeah, signature. And that's probably a topic for another show, but like the idea of different legal codes and what rights do we actually have? If you're talking about admiralty law or what
Hmm.
type of common law or we're even seeing right now federal law versus states' rights. Like this has completely gone absolutely nuts. And
Yeah, well, just look at what happened in Wisconsin when the Supreme Court there, the state Supreme Court, said the lockdowns were unconstitutional. Yet in Michigan, it was the complete opposite, wasn't it?
right, yeah, Michigan Supreme Court ruled that the governor basically could extend her lockdown, use her governor powers for as long as she wanted, and
Right.
blah blah blah. And so, um,
How can there be
when
a
I
disconnect in something that oversees all law?
right,
That's just another juxtaposition to add to the pile that we've accumulated so far.
yeah, you just have to keep on appealing and this and that. And, all these people are like, well, these small businesses can just sue the governors and this and that. And it's like, well, how long is that going to take and with what money and,
Exactly.
who's going to represent them and, who actually knows the law to actually try to appeal all this. I mean, there are supposedly legal ways to go about this, but at what expense? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just so devastating to see what's being done to businesses right now and the individual people.
Just look at the unemployment right now is what, 40 plus million people are unemployed because of this for basically no reason. That's going to have huge repercussions for years and years and years to come. It's not, I don't know.
It's again, we can see this in some of the plans that are out there on paper with signatures. These, if we go look at what we're able to see from the UN papers and read through these documents and trying to and you can go, there's law dictionaries online. You can, if you're serious about all this, then you're going to look and you're going to learn some of the language, at least to get through, because you can't count on the press. You just can't. I could say really nasty things, but just look and read these white papers. That's, I think, the last thing I wanted to say here. I think Holly is going to need to wrap up. So let's bring you back on, Holly, and tell us where people can find you and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I noticed I got a couple of my viewers in the chat, which is cool. And I have a YouTube channel called Zoon Politikon, and I will stick that link in the chat here.
It's
On
in the show.
YouTube.
It's already in the description.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, so that's probably the best way to find me is just online, or you can email me at zoonpoliticon@mail.com is the best way to get a hold of me. And thanks, guys, so much. I'd love to chat some more, but it's kind of late, and the baby's she's missing me now. So
No, it's totally cool. We
Yeah.
totally understand. Thanks so much.
it was really cool to talk to grown-ups for a minute, though.
We really appreciate having you on the show. It was a great conversation and hope you come back sometime.
Thanks,
Thank you
guys.
so much.
All right,
Thanks.
take
Have
care.
a great night.
All right. So, do we have call-ins now? Does anyone want to call in and talk?
Let's hang out for a bit, Jerry.
Yeah, we got 20 minutes.
Yes. So give us a call. Is the number out there, Jer?
No. Wait to see if anyone raises their hand. I'll come. Oh, come on. So Oswald dropped a link in chat that George Floyd, the medical examiner, has said now that he had coronavirus.
Oh, Lord. We were just talking about it because it came out that he was, he'd been on a substance. What was that substance, Jer? I showed you that.
Fentanyl.
Fentanyl. Yeah. So, of course. It's sad times. I'm telling you, these numbers, that's the thing. The numbers aren't adding up anywhere we look. There is so much. I feel like we're in, this is, I keep using the hashtag Gotham is real, but I'm coming from the Lovecraftian sense and not really the Gotham is New York City Batman sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we look at this whole thing like a sci-fi novel, or like if we strip ourselves of everything and just look at it as like a series of graphic novels, it's very dynamic. And it's this kind of time where you get the rise of the real villains and the real heroes, and we start seeing, we've had character development, and we're going to start seeing extraordinary things like you saw when you were in the Netherlands,
Oh, Jesus.
Etherlands.
That was so wild.
Well, it's getting wild.
I know. Thomas Sheridan, if you've been watching any of his daily videos, I think it was yesterday, he talked about how he expects to see enormous weather anomalies coming now and more UFO flaps and whatnot. Just psychic phenomena manifesting in the sky. The four-dimensional interactive hologram above us.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's what Jung says when the collective is crunched down like this and it starts getting crazy, is that the projection of stuff in the sky, especially.
Yeah, that reminds me too that the one thing that I have noticed that doesn't really correlate with a lot of this is the Schumann resonance, which a lot of people put faith in being an indicator of psyche, you know, of the collective. Also, I was talking last night, we were talking on Cruising with Steak about the Global Consciousness Project and how it went gray for a few days, like completely down. And we don't know if that was a tech issue or a data collection issue. But I thought it was...
The Schumann went down?
No. The GCP, the Global Consciousness Project, the DOT. You familiar with it? I know you know what I'm talking about.
Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank right now, Jer.
Okay, so it's a project run by Princeton, I think. I don't remember. It's some university has this project where they monitor the variations in random number generators, because the random numbers generated by that type of hardware and software stays within a specific range of variability, right? It doesn't really generate numbers outside of this, call it a bell curve, for lack of a better term. It generates numbers in a bell curve, right? But sometimes it doesn't fit the bell curve, right? So they will assign a color red or green being up below, red or green indicating below or above the mean of that bell curve. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So the theory is that when the collective's excited about something or depressed about something, it will drive the random number generators up or down out of that average range. Not ringing a bell?
It's not. I think I have to get a visual on it, maybe.
I can show you.
I know, and Lucian is going crazy.
Oh. Shoot, what I do? Share screen.
So while you're pulling that up, have you been dreaming a lot, Jer?
I have.
I've been having unreal dreams.
I'll put the link in chat, the GCP dot, put it in the show notes. And you can't see it now because I just closed it. There, this.
Yeah. Okay, yes, I have seen it, but I haven't. I think you've posted this maybe in one of our private little groups, right?
Probably. Yeah, so it monitors the network, and when there's variances, it drives the dot green or red, or blue actually, I'm sorry, for low. But here you can see, and people
spiked.
Yeah, we spiked like 20 hours ago, which was last night's curfew.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, it went gray for about a week.
So what are you making of that?
I don't know. I don't know if they were down or if it was an actual problem with the data. You know, if it was so high off the chart, it couldn't even be graphed, kind of thing. I don't know.
This brings to mind the card. It's kind of like, this is kind of left field, but it's at the same time, this is all connected. So when we look at these things, these symbolic cards that are getting played, and I don't want to use the obvious one, I want to use the next obvious one, and that is the White House going black, right? Turning all the lights off as a sign of blackouts to come. What do you think about that?
I think that's conjecture. I don't buy it.
Well, it's definitely conjecture, but do you think so? You think it holds any weight? I mean, it's of course it's speculative at this point, until something happens.
What was their reason for doing it?
Well, there's like that whole idea of like smoke signals of things to come, and so I don't know. I just think it was interesting. It's very symbolic image, and I think it was quite rare. If I can believe anything I read,
Yeah, right. Well, what about the whole idea and news reporting that Trump went down into the bunker?
Right, I saw that.
I never got any confirmation from that from anyone other than like CNN.
I think, and didn't he say he went just down there to? I saw something today in someone's stream that he was just down there inspecting it or something.
He was redecorating. You gotta put some gold leaf
some
over
gold.
Here. You need some gold.
Make it Apollyon. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I found that provocative though. I thought, this seems interesting. It just seems it's just interesting. I'm putting out a psychic eye later tonight, hopefully, because I had this little vision that I want to put forward, and it plays into it's weird because it corresponds to a vision this Latina girl had in, I think, Mexico, maybe.
Not the Fatima stuff, right?
No, not Fatima stuff.
That's another thing that Thomas Sheridan brought up, was that to expect more visions, more like of Mary and Jesus and whatnot, because of this, what's going on as well. Just sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah. No, but I expect that stuff too. I haven't had a lot of time to look around. I've been so busy, as my voice is so fried too. I've been so busy and talking so much, and I'm actually on overload with all this information, all these images, where I feel like I can only watch so much right now. And so I've been extra picky, but I do love Thomas Sheridan. I try to tune into him always.
He's a voice of reason in today's climate. If you're going to watch anything, watch him, because everything else is just it's fear-mongering and or fake news.
Yeah, well, it's all, I like We Are Change. I like Luke. He writes the center. He's just trying to report information.
Yeah, but he's a lefty. I mean,
he's not, though. He is not, Jerry. I've been following him for years and years and years, and I've seen him go. I mean, you may want to think that, but right now he seems to be leaning a little bit left, because he's definitely not for Trump. So, but he's not. He tries to keep it clean. So
yeah.
But anyway,
I agree.
It's not like watching CNN or Fox or any of that stuff.
No, not at all. Or OANN is like completely right. I mean, to be honest, the best news coverage, the most non-biased news right now is Fox, to me.
I see. I can't pull up to any of those stations. I really do like looking at the people on the streets, like seeing the cell phone footage and stuff.
Yeah, so do I. And I'm not saying I watch Fox News. I'm just saying the clips that they have on YouTube seem to be less biased than everything else. If you look at like the network news or CNN, MSNBC, they're all basically anti-Trump, which is fine. I'm just saying, but that's all they report on. They don't report about any other news. And if there is news, they somehow blame Trump for it. And which again that's their prerogative, but it's not news. It's just opinion.
Right. All that's opinion.
Right. Whereas Fox News seems to actually report news in an objective manner for the most part. And I'm not talking about Hannity. I'm talking about like the regular news.
I just go to, I don't do this anymore because I got rid of the cable, but C-SPAN used to just, they'd be pointing, they're just cameras pointed in legislature and you're just watching them legislate.
Not anymore.
Oh, really? C-SPAN's changed that?
Yep, they're all lefty now.
It used to literally just be cameras pointed in.
I know, but they I forget what it was.
They've got people actually talking with opinions and stuff.
No, but they refuse to cover some things.
Oh, shame on them. That's terrible.
I agree.
You could always count on them just covering what was actually going on and with nothing else. It was basically just cameras and oh my goodness. Yeah, see, that's more of this fuckery, and it's why it's so difficult to navigate. But it's still not worth ending lifelong relationships. It's still not worth shutting people out that you love. It's not worth it. I don't know why people are getting so vile towards each other over these people that care not for them. And they truly, politicians do not care for you. They do not care. It's so hard to get that across to people. I think definitely the bigger ones, local, maybe a little different in smaller communities, like certainly in a tiny town where I am, you can, not that anyone here cares for me, but at least see them around, I see them. Well, I used to, when you could go to a restaurant.
They're all open down here.
Yeah, we got pushed back. So actually today I just heard our parks are open.
Oh, well, good for you.
I know. I've been going to the park anyway, so.
I know. My life really hasn't changed since it started. I don't eat out or anything. But I go out I've been going out every day getting some sun, why not?
Yeah. Well, I've got such a nice yard that it'll be a bitter day if I can't be in my yard. But you can't see me in my yard because it's the woods. It's a thicket. So, but I suppose I may need to use an umbrella.
Bigfoot can see you out there.
Sasquatch. I can't believe I said that earlier, Jerry. Oh my God, my mom's from the Sasquatch tribe.
She's big and hairy. All right, it's a good point to end the show.
Yes. So what's up next?
So next week we have Dan Chukas.
Oh, yay. Shook Daddy.
Is he
from Cosmic Keys?
The Cosmic Keys podcast. Yeah. He's on Nox Mente next week on this channel. Same bad time, same bad channel.
He's great. He's a great astrologer, and I really like their podcast.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. You should check it out.
They're very smooth. It's a well done podcast.
Yep. And we'd like to, again, thank Holly for coming on the show. It was great to have her while she could stay.
Yes, she's a new mother. That we had a baby appearance by sound. So
yep. We're trying to branch out to some more current eventy type stuff here versus esoteric. Not that I want to get rid of the esoteric or the conspiracy stuff. I love all that stuff, but just
I'd like to just branch out. Period.
Yeah, so. We're looking to diversify here. So
let's get a whole bunch of different types.
As we get our sea legs. Enjoy the ride.
Now that we've got our channel back.
Yeah, now that we've got our channel back. But as a show, go ahead.
Jerry, who I want to get back on is Robert Powell, because he's a priest now.
Oh.
and he wears he's a full-on priest, so he's super intelligent, but I'm interested in that journey. So when I'm on an obelisk, I'm interested in his journey from basically full-on super occultist to a Catholic priest. I'm very interested in.
That's so weird.
I think there's a cohesive path there, and I think that it would be a wonderful journey he could take us on, because he's intelligent. I mean, he's very super intelligent.
Or he had the shit scared out of him by something.
Well, I want to know that, and he's got Asperger's, and so I just enjoy that dryness also. So I'll reach out and see.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But don't you think that would be an interesting journey?
Absolutely. I'd love to talk to him. And you know who else I want to talk to? Stephen Skinner, Dr. Stephen Skinner.
Yes. I'm actually nervous to talk to Skinner, although all our friends have.
He'll sick a demon on us.
I know. Well, he's so super intelligent.
I know.
It's like scary. Like, I feel like I'll stumble on something.
Yeah. I've got this huge list of people I want to invite on the show. And we've got on this show, let me look at the calendar.
The Obelisk.
On the Obelisk, we have the next one is with Shane Bales, Shane the Ruiner.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah,
yes.
So that's
I saw he just surfaced recently.
Yep. And then after that, we have David Whitehead from Truth Warrior.
Excellent.
Which hopefully will lead to a show with Michael Tessarion. So.
Oh, that'll be nice.
Yeah.
We should get on. I think we should get on. I just saw Jag's comment. Get on some Satanists.
Yeah.
I know so many. We could get on as Satanists.
Tom Sheridan's going to come on.
I mean, there's so many.
Too.
We want to.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I talked to Thomas.
So we love the Obelisk, everyone.
Yeah. Probably going to have him on.
And he said
July.
yes, right?
Yeah, he did. He was just busy and he was worn out, what he told me.
Yeah.
So I told him in July. So probably July 22nd we'll have him on. 722. I love that.
Yes, Suzanne. I think I was a nun in a previous life too. I see. It's nice to see the chat, by the way. This is fun. My computer's holding up. I'm on the old computer chair doing this.
Wow. Shocking.
I'm close to the
edge.
I'm always close to the edge, Jerry.
Close to the edit. I'm at edit.
I live. Yes. So I think it's like that proximity.
All right.
Thank you, everyone out there. It's nice to see the chat.
Yeah.
By the way.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.